Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Welcome to tonight's podcast. This is a production of Bella Grande Media. This is the murder part. And in tonight's episode, we'll be looking at the case of Betty Broderick. So I want to welcome my co-host to start with. Jeff, how you doing?
Very good. Very good. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Good.
Thanks for asking.
Good.
Excited about Betty Broderick?
Yeah, this is certainly a strange one. I don't know if there's any normalcy in anything we talk about, but it still strikes you as an odd one.
Yeah, definitely a case that is irregular. Mike, how you doing?
I'm doing really good. Really good.
How are you feeling about Betty Broderick?
Well, about her personally, or just about doing the episode? Doing the episode, I'm actually really excited. This is a really interesting case with a lot of twists and turns. Just a lot of twists and turns.
Yeah, it again is unusual. There's a certain range you expect to see in various murders. One thing is you expect to see the public kind of not liking the murder. That's usually what we see. But this case, there's a little bit of that, of course. There's a lot of people who are not happy with Betty Broderick, but there's also a number of supporters that really empathize and maybe to some degree sympathize with her point of view. And it's just so unusual considering the graphic nature of her actions, which we'll get to. But it just goes to show you that empathy can be expanded quite a bit. You can really get into the mind of a lot of different people who did a lot of different things. Everybody's limit is set somewhere different.
Yeah, and we'll get into the details of everything that happened, but some of the stuff is that people got into her story before the big divorce. Well, it's a big divorce thing going on, but people really sympathize with her for all the stuff she did before that, and then going through that is where things seem to get crazier.
It captures, I think, a familiar pattern that I believe most people are disgusted by, which is the idea of a wealthy man, a successful professional, who is with a wife for some time. The wife supports him in various ways through the career development. And then people use the phrase, he trades in. Right? He trades in the older model, which is really the same age as him, for a younger model. And usually there is a attraction differential in there as well, right? Because in terms of his ability to attract a mate, he's in a good spot. He's at a good age. He's got a lot of money, stable, things like that. And it rubs people the wrong way.
According to some people that knew Betty or know Betty, they talk about that being very prevalent in their neighborhood, in the circles that they ran with, that a lot of high-powered people, whether it be lawyers, doctors, whomever else, and they report that happened a lot. And so it was something that people in that kind of income bracket, whatever it was, social level, that they dealt with a lot. So I'm sure there's some out there that understood exactly what she was going through, but also didn't come to the same conclusion she came to. So, yeah, you're right.
It's one of those things that how do you prepare for it? It's not, no one gets married and thinks, well, when I turn 45 or 50, I'll be alone. I'll have to find a new love interest or live alone or whatever. I can see how people get upset.
Or run my car into my ex-lover's house.
Right.
Whatever works.
Buy a pistol. Yeah, all the things that we see.
Leave a nasty voicemail literally every week.
Yeah, there's definitely healthy and unhealthy ways, or I guess depending on the point of view, criminal or non-criminal, or both that are at work here. So let's take a look a little bit of the history of Broderick, just to give some context to who we're dealing with here. So Betty was born in 1947 in Bronxville, New York. Yeah. Where is Bronxville? That's different than the Bronx, obviously.
It is. It's in Westchester County. It's north of Midtown Manhattan.
So it's near New York City. Yeah. Probably a wealthy area if it's in Westchester County.
Oh, yeah.
I imagine, right? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, her parents were very, very wealthy. Her dad owned and was the CEO of a construction company. she grew up with country clubs and things like that, and her mother was very, very social. I think in one interview, Betty described her as, and I'm going to paraphrase here, described her as just very social and needing us, meeting her kids, to always be wearing the best clothes when presented in front of the public.
So image was important.
Yeah.
And this is something that might make the sting of divorce a little worse, right? Because divorce really deprecates the image of potentially both people, right? It brings it down.
She also was Catholic, raised Catholic, which does have certain views on divorce.
And I think that sets an expectation that you marry for life.
Right.
So,
one of the major things that she was raised with, other than like the appearance is everything kind of thing, was that she was raised with this expectation that she would get married and be a stay-at-home mom. Like that was what kind of she was groomed for. She was told her entire life by her mother, who that's exactly what she did, was like, you're going to be a stay-at-home mom. Like you're going to get married, you're going to have babies, and things like that.
yeah, I don't think this would be an uncommon career path for someone born to a wealthy family near New York City,
Right.
Especially with the Roman Catholic kind of a traditional roles for men and women, and the same roles, right? They're unchanging throughout the lifespan, right? So you adopt a role and you keep it the whole way through.
Yeah.
So she had an expectation that would be consistent with the cultural values of her community and her family. So she went to high school and graduated in 1965, and then went to college and graduated from there as well.
Yeah. She did have a degree in early childhood education, but I think she was looking, in colloquial terms of the time, she was looking for her MRS degree,
Right.
as they say. She was looking for that Mrs. to be in front of her name. And I think during the time when she was at college was when she met Dan, when she went to visit him, a friend of hers, and met him at Notre Dame.
Yeah, I think based on the culture, right? She went to Notre Dame and saw him at a game or something.
Yeah, like she was visiting a friend of hers from her hometown at Notre Dame, and then she met Dan while she was there.
Yeah, so I think based on the cultural norms, you could look at Betty's situation in terms of college. Like some people might be surprised that she went to college if the plan was never to use the degree. But I think it kind of offers plan A and plan B, right? So you go, you work hard, you do get a degree, but at the same time, again, from her cultural point of view, you stay open to the possibility of finding a mate, because it's a good place to, even though she went to another college ultimately,
Right.
but to find a mate, she could have found one where she was.
It was incredibly common at the time, for a couple of decades before that. If you look at some of the TV shows, some of my favorite TV shows, like The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel or Mad Men, some of the primary female protagonists, they went to college specifically to get that MRS degree. Like they were there to try and catch a husband. The fact that they got a degree and graduated was just kind of secondary. And they never expected to use it, which in Marvelous Mrs. Maisel is why she gets a degree in Russian literature. She had no intention of using that at all, ever.
Right. So you can study something that would be interesting to you and not have to worry so much about the marketability.
The early childhood education really supports the desire to have a family, though, too. Let me go learn about how to teach kids, be with kids all day, etc. And I know I'm probably just going to be a stay-at-home mom, and do soccer mom thing, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, all that kind of stuff. And I think that degree supports it as well. So, yeah, second, a backup plan as well, but also this is really what I plan to do, but just from home, probably.
For Betty, I think that actually absolutely was a thought process, was hey, if I'm going to be a stay-at-home mom, I want to be the best possible stay-at-home mom that I can be.
Oh, yeah.
And that means being able to teach my kids, and knowing how to deal with kids and stuff. So, yeah, I think that was definitely a thing for her.
So where we are in the story right now is she met Dan Broderick at Notre Dame, right? And Dan's got an impressive education, right? Yeah. I guess around this time or at some point after this, I guess it was sometime after this, he completed a medical doctorate degree, right? So
he finished his undergrad at Notre Dame and then went to grad school in New York City. And that's when he and Betty started. He moved to New York City, and that's when he and Betty started really dating. And it was, he ended up getting a medical degree, completed his MD.
Yeah, so he's a medical doctor, a physician.
But he didn't finish that degree until after he and Betty were married, though, and had their first kid.
Okay, so they're already together. So he's in New York.
Like he was in grad school. They met. They start dating. They end up getting married. He continues grad school.
Yes.
Betty gets pregnant and has her first kid. And it's shortly after that he graduated with his MD.
Okay, and then he also gets a law degree from Harvard Law.
Yeah. Yeah. Right after he got the MD, he goes, I don't want to be a doctor. I'm going to go to lawyer. I'm going to become a lawyer. And, to be honest, it actually was a really smart decision because a physician attorney can make a lot of money.
Yeah, it is probably wise financially. Well, at least it was for him. Although ultimately things didn't work out for him. But before that, before his life came to an end, things were going pretty well financially, surprisingly well, really.
Spoiler alert.
Right, spoiler for how this case ends. But we see that, there are a lot of physicians who get that degree, and by the time they go through all that education, they've soured, usually not on the whole idea of medicine, but I have seen many times they sour on their specialty, and they want to switch. And it's relatively difficult in that world to switch, just because so much work with their residency. It's not necessarily the schooling, that's 3 years, medical school is 3 years, but then the residency, all that specialized training and under experts and everything. So if you are going to get that degree and abandon it or use it for something else, right away is the time to do it, and that's what he did.
Right.
He never really had time as a physician in the field, like working with people.
Yeah.
It's important to note here, too, that while he was doing all his school stuff, Betty, she was definitely supporting them financially. I don't know if she could be considered the main supporter, but...
No, I think she really was, because Dan was doing school on student loans.
Yeah.
Like, he wasn't bringing in any income during that time period.
Right.
So Betty was in a situation where she'd been trained to be the stay-at-home mom, and all of a sudden she's got to be a working mom. And
part-time hustling, as we would say now, selling stuff.
Yeah, selling Avon and Tupperware. Right?
Yeah. She was doing side things. She was doing everything she could to bring money in, but she was still having to be a working mom.
Yeah, so I think that's important. I think that's an important part of the story. It wasn't like he had already earned his education when he met her, or right after. There was some time, and it wasn't like she was just trying to enjoy the life. She worked hard. She sold products. He was nobody, so to speak, when she met him, and she was there as he became somebody.
And it's important to note on that the pattern of him doing school and her supporting them financially started right after they got married. And because he was still in his medical degree. But at that point, I think it wasn't as big a deal for Betty at that point, just because they didn't have any kids yet. It's okay. She's got to fill her time with something while she waits to get pregnant.
She got pregnant on their honeymoon.
Yeah. Well,
but you mean before they were married?
Before they were married, she was doing that thing, and she got pregnant on the honeymoon. But especially in the early 1960s, she wouldn't have known that immediately. But she was still trying, and the entire time she was pregnant, she was hustling to try and make ends meet, and with the expectation of, well, at least while I'm pregnant, he's going to finish up being a doctor right around the time the kid born, and I'm going to have a doctor husband, and I'm going to be able to just sit back and raise the kids, and that'll be great. And then he goes, I'm going to become a lawyer instead. I'm not going to be a doctor.
Right. So that's what he does. He becomes a lawyer with that medical degree. It makes him very valuable, and he's hired right away. In San Diego, actually, technically in La Jolla, right near San Diego. So, a nice area, Southern California, especially during the time frame that we're talking about here.
Yeah, the law firm was in San Diego, and they moved to La Jolla right around that time. And I think that, again, Betty was thinking, stars in her eyes, this is going to be the best thing. Like, I'm going to be able to finally be a stay-at-home mom because Dan's going to be a big-time lawyer.
Yeah, so everything seems to be going pretty well, right? So we're in the early 80s in San Diego area. He's got money.
Well, the difficulty was he was just starting in the law firm. So he wasn't making as much money as they both thought he would be coming off.
Oh, he was a little bit lower.
He was a little bit lower. Like he was still getting paid a lot, but the house they moved into was really expensive. and like they spent a lot trying to furnish it and do things, and then Betty still ended up having to work. She still ended up selling a Tupperware and an Avon, while Dan was working at the law firm. So she was still trying to raise the kids, and they were having more kids at that point. They ended up having a total of 4, but one, the last one, which would have been 5, died a few days after being born. And I think that's actually a crucial point in this case, personally. But we can get to that.
Another massive stressor.
Yeah, I think
on
that
somebody who's already maybe not completely balanced. I think we'll talk about.
And when we get to the timeline of things, I think it's really a crucial event that happened.
I think it's pretty incredible to think about how she was working part-time, raising kids, supporting Dan through all of his stuff. And I don't know what's involved in getting a law degree or going to medical school, but I imagine that's a whole lot of work, a whole lot of time commitment, a whole lot of things, just time away from your family. So I think about my own kids, and when I have to just be there with the kids by myself, that's tough, So having to do that, but also working part-time, but also supporting your husband, but also doing everything, I imagine, around the house, that's a whole lot of commitment. And I imagine that whether Betty was fully into this or not, whether she was, totally okay with it or not, I imagine that really played into all the events that unfolded later on. And thinking, I did a whole lot for you.
She was there during the tough times.
Right. And then he wasn't, after the events of infidelity unfolded. So that's pretty significant.
So let's move to the fall of 1982, when Dan makes a hiring decision that would turn out to be significant.
So this hiring decision is super significant, but it was only, I think, less than a year before that when Betty's 5th child was born and then died a few days later. They didn't even name him. I think it was a boy child named. They didn't even name him. And so it was just somewhere between 1980, 1981 when that happened. And so then in the fall of 82, Dan makes his hiring decision, which turns out to be very fateful. And this is why I think it's crucial, is because that kind of the death of a child can throw a huge wedge in a marriage. Even if things were not great but okay, that is a hand grenade that just...
It's certainly going to expose any weaknesses. And maybe they had assumed, or maybe not, that the foundation of their marriage was fairly strong. Who knows? But and who knows what he was thinking when he made the hiring decision, like if it was based on an attraction or whatever. But who did he hire? Let's get to that.
Linda Colkina.
Yeah.
And she was born in 1961, so she was 21.
She was 21 years old when she was hired. She had like one job before being hired as Dan's receptionist, and that was as a flight attendant on Delta Airlines.
So a 15-year difference. Am I doing my math right? 1944 versus 1961.
Yeah.
17 years. Is that right?
Oh yeah, you're right.
17.
Right. That's why I asked if I'm doing my math right.
No, the answer is no. You're not doing your math right.
So this is interesting.
Sometime between 15 and 20 year difference.
That's right. So this is interesting because I think that if you look at age differences in couples, of course, technically in the world of counseling, what we would say is any age difference is okay if the people want to be okay. And I think that's true. But in reality, there's certain stressors that are introduced as you reach certain age differences. Like there's some Hollywood mainstream celebrities that have massive age differences. I don't know the differences off the top of my head, but like Jeff Goldblum, I believe, is married to somebody much, much younger. Mel Gibson, I think, is, or dating somebody, I don't know. But, we're talking 30, 40-year differences.
Right.
I think that, was it Dick Van Dyke? Was married to somebody 45 years younger. He's in his 90s, and they were married when she was like 45, 46, something like that. I think so. So, it's hard to ignore that type of difference.
There are maturity level differences and life experience level differences that can absolutely change outlook on things. And that can also create power differential. We've talked before about power differential things. When you have somebody who's 17 years older than you, who was, drinking and having fun when you were born. That's a person who's and who has an established career at that point, who's your boss. Like, there's immediately a bunch of power differentials going on in that.
Yeah.
And like immediately, it didn't seem apparent that anything was going on, although Betty did start suspecting that Dan was having an affair with Linda.
It seemed like
but he denied it.
Started right away. Yeah. Now, it's interesting. So 17 years, what I was getting at is that's right on that, to me, that's right that tipping point zone where it's like 15 years. There's some adjustments you have to make 15 years, especially depending on the actual ages. Like, are they relatively young or relatively old?
Right. If you're 45 and the other person is 30, there's not a huge difference in the maturity level or lived experience.
Yeah, but 35 and 20.
But yeah.
It's, and that's kind of where he is, she's 21, he's 17 years older. It's not the best 17-year difference that you could find. Right. So anyway, he starts having an affair. He does deny it. And then by February of 85, he's moved out. So things have gone downhill within a couple of years.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Less than 2 years.
Well, since it's worth noting, Betty, when she started suspecting that Dan was having an affair, became very vocal about it. Right. She even admitted that she became vocal about it, and some of her friends and even her children said, like, as soon as she laid eyes on Linda at the law firm, she was convinced, and she was just very, very vocal. And Dan, of course, the entire time would deny it, but it led to a lot of fights, a lot of arguments about it. If he was leaving to go out to schmooze clients in the evening, she was like, "Are you going to go see your girlfriend?" And it would just blow up into something.
He had missed a birthday of hers at some point, if I remember correctly, and so there was a lot of things that were not going right, not only with the affair, but just in their relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then Betty makes a move that does not seem consistent with her prior behavior, and that's leaving the children with him one by one, dropping them off one by one. Yeah. Very unusual.
And he wasn't home. Right, most of the times, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Well, once he moved out, he kind of just told her outright, "Yeah, I've been sleeping with her. Like, we've been having an affair since day one." Right. And I think one of the things that she did, I think this is the thing that we've seen in movies and TV shows, but I think it's one of those things that a lot of people really empathize with. It's like, as soon as she found that out, she went back home because his stuff wasn't moved out yet. Stuff was still in the house. She went home and grabbed his tuxedo that he got married in, his top hat and tails, went out to the barbecue and just set it on fire. Just burned his tuxedo as a symbolic thing. But then, afterwards, she started slowly just dropping the kids off at his house one at a time. And she told him she wanted full custody of all the kids, and then just would drop them off.
Yeah, in a way, I mean, this is something that, I've seen a lot of divorces. It's very unusual. Like, this is just not how things play out typically. Only thing I can really think of here, other than like the anger, is maybe it like forces him to be re-involved. Like, you have a family, I'm going to remind you have a family by forcing you to care for your children. I don't know. I mean, it's a terrible tactical move, right, for her. I mean, depending on what she wanted, but I mean, she's kind of giving up some ground there in negotiations and the court.
I would speculate that that each time she did so, she'd also had some sort of argument with that kid. I think that she'd been, because her kids, when they've given interviews later on, said that she was constantly bad mouthing their father and like spitting poison in their ears, so to speak, and just going off. And every once in a while, they would speak up. So I think if they spoke up, or if they did something wrong that wasn't even part of that, it was, "You're going to your father's," and then she'd take them and drop them off and leave, and like neither Dan or Linda are at the house, so they're just kind of sitting there on the front steps waiting.
Yeah, they were casualties of a really nasty divorce. Now, interesting. This was the Broderick versus Broderick case. Their divorce became a notorious case in the San Diego area.
It actually gathered national attention during that divorce.
Amazing.
Like it was so contentious that it became like really known across the country.
Yeah, and
People were
Dan-
following it in the newspaper. Any new develops in Broderick versus Broderick?
Yeah, so you have Dan, who's actually president of the San Diego bar. So he's really moved up.
Yeah.
He's a prominent attorney, and
I think that was one of the biggest problems, because none of the attorneys in San Diego wanted to represent Betty against the head of the bar association. Like, they didn't want to make an enemy out of that guy.
And they knew how good he was too.
Yeah.
He's making a lot of money at that point.
He was
Lots of
making a
clients.
lot of money.
Yeah.
A lot of money. At that point, he was also he left the law firm that had hired him and had founded his own firm. And he referred to him as the Count de Money. Referred to himself as the Count de Money for a while, because he was just making so much money with the malpractice cases, which was the primary thing. Like, he was a physician, so he knew what to look for and what to ask, and which is why physician attorneys are so valuable. Those malpractice cases can bring in millions and millions of dollars. Even in the 80s, they were bringing in millions.
I think a number I heard was like $135,000 a month or $140,000 a month at some point.
Yeah.
So I don't know what that was at that time, compared to today's dollars, but I mean that's still a significant amount of money.
That's still a significant
on
amount of
any
money.
terms. Yeah.
Yeah, if you make $100,000 a month for 12 months, that's over $1 million a year.
Right.
And hey, when you get up to that point, there are tax protections.
that's a massive amount of money for
It
the
is.
early 80s.
It is.
That's astonishing.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's almost a license to print money.
Yeah.
Like it's this point where you could just disregard spending, because not much costs that much back then, right? So in a month, like, you have a financial problem, in a month it's solved.
Yeah.
You just wait 30 days. So yeah, it really moved.
Right.
It moved this divorce up a few levels in terms of.
You have a plumbing problem. Give me 5 minutes.
That's right. There's zero cash right now.
I don't have that cash. I don't have that cash right now, but give me 5 minutes. I'll go to the ATM and pull out. How much was it? 30, 40,000? It's only 700.
Well, it reminds me of the Montgomery Burns character in The Simpsons. It's Burns money, like, for to light a cigar, like, doesn't matter.
Right, but the point is, Dan Broderick is incredibly wealthy at this point, and is one of the most powerful attorneys in San Diego, and he's working with other attorneys because he's not doing the stupid thing. He's not representing himself, but he's working directly with the attorneys, and he's a lawyer, so he knows how to work everything and work the system. And Betty's left not being able to find an attorney for a long time in San Diego.
It's difficult to overstate the advantage that he had. I mean, people say, well, she was overplaying it. It wouldn't matter. He understood the battlefield so much better.
And I think this really is one of those areas where people really start to find sympathy for her, because he's Goliath at that point, and she's fighting against him in this domestic battle, trying to just get something, get anything, and she's losing. It seems like she's losing, and the people are going like, wait, she supported him through 2 different higher level degrees, and was raising his kids for all these years, and then he's just going to throw her over for some little tart, and then he's going to use all of this power and money that she helped him get, by the way. She's going to use all of that stuff just to throw her off to the side. I think that's where a lot of that sympathy was coming from.
Yeah, she definitely had her supporters, and still does. So the divorce took about 4 years. It finished in 1989, and there was a substantial amount of money that Dan was paying to Betty on a monthly basis. Of course, he was making a ton of money, so it probably didn't matter. She started leaving messages on his answering machine that were less than polite.
Yeah,
Hundreds.
hundreds, at least 5 a week. Like, just calling his answering machine when she knew he wasn't home, because she wanted to make sure that he's got left on the answering machine, just cussing him out, just cussing.
So this profanity is important here too, because and also with Dan's Dan being an attorney, he knew the whole system. So one of the things that he would do would charge Betty certain amounts based on each curse word that she used. So it'd be a certain amount for curse words. It'd be a certain amount if she ignored the restraining order. It'd be a certain amount if she did this, did that, whatever. So he started to charge her with these things because he knew the system, he knew the judges, he knew everyone involved. And so this was an example of him using his stance against her in a way that people normally wouldn't be able to do, which made this such a high profile case and really pin them against each other that much more. So a lot of significant factors here.
He also knew how to work the system, put multiple restraining orders on her, all of which she ignored, every single one. She would go vandalize his house when he wasn't home. She would go in and steal things and bring them home. And she would, at one point, she got so angry that she drove her car into the front door of his house while their kids were inside.
Yeah, so just to clarify, not up to.
No, not up to, into, through, crashed the car through the front door.
Later on said the door just came off the hinge.
Like that scene in Lethal Weapon, right? Car, front door, right through. That's what she did. Like with her kids in the house, she had no idea where the kids were in the house and didn't care. Just crashed right in.
I heard different things about this. There was a movie we were just talking about. It's out on Netflix now called Dirty John. The second season of it is about Betty. And so in that, it's dramatized, of course.
Amanda Peet and Christian Slater, by the way.
In that, dramatized, she crashes. Police come, they take her out. Other reports say that she had a knife that she took out from underneath the seat or something and didn't stab Dan, but threatened him with it. Either way, according to that movie or the series Dirty John, she got taken away to a institution right after that. And again, I'm not sure if this is true or not, but Dan made a comment in Dirty John, and I'm not really sure why it's named that. I plan to look into that, but made a comment about, I don't have admitting privileges, because he's got his medical degree. I don't have admitting privileges, but you can find somewhere to put her. I'll make some calls and make sure it happens. This is not something you and I could do, right? We couldn't say to the police, I don't have admitting privileges, but I can make something happen. This is not only his lawyer stuff, but
and we are licensed professionals in the mental health field, and I couldn't be like, oh yeah, just throw her in a psych ward somewhere, and
I'll just make it happen. Right?
I'll just make it happen. Yeah.
This is above and beyond many people. He holds privileges with his stance in the community that most people don't have. So that was definitely working against Betty as well.
It is hard to imagine though this case being more dramatized than it actually than it in reality. Like it's one of those where I think I would watch that show. I've seen a couple of the movies and things and be like, okay, this is tame in comparison to what actually happened. Right, when you look down into it, get to some of the details. But I am looking forward to watching Dirty John. I haven't seen it yet myself, but I am looking forward to watching it because this case is, it's out there.
It's amazing, and to your point, Jeff, Dan did have an incredible amount of power, and I think at this point maybe you could argue the moral high ground because she was the one who just kept attacking.
Right.
Aggressive, the knife and the car and the calls.
And early on in that period when she's making those calls, when she decides to purchase a firearm, she purchases a revolver.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe she claimed at the time that she purchased it because she was intending to kill herself with it.
Okay, is that her?
I think that was her stance on it, but she didn't use it. At anywhere near the time she purchased it, she set it aside. Although some of the testimony by her daughter, and her daughter wrote an autobiography about the time, was that right around that time she said she was going to kill Dan and Linda. With that gun. She said she was going to kill them with that gun. She was going to shoot them.
I'd also read that she target practice on multiple occasions with that gun. People reported it to Dan. And Dan would say things like, you know what, she's not going to hurt me. I'm too valuable to her. I send her money each month. She's not going to hurt me.
And what's really important about the purchase of that firearm is that well, one, it would later be used in a commission of the crimes, but that it happened just before Dan and Linda got married. And that happened in April of 1989, so that wasn't too far after the divorce was finalized.
Right.
Yeah,
Now,
so not a good sign.
yeah, not a good sign. I mean, and that's the thing. It was about a month before the wedding when Betty bought that gun, and then it was so bad that a lot of Dan's best men and his groomsmen and friends, and even Linda, tried to talk him into wearing a bulletproof vest to their wedding
They saw it coming.
because it was going to be an outdoor wedding. They were going to have an outdoor wedding, and he was just like, "Nah, I'll be fine." Because
I'm too valuable to her, right?
He was convinced that she would never do anything to against him in that way.
Yeah, so we see maybe a bit of narcissism on his part, right? Where he's underestimating his adversary, one that he did kind of form, right? And again, this is, I think, why people can empathize with Betty. I think it's important to note that she claimed that the aggression was not just one way, that she was being taunted with various products that were mailed to her, like slimming treatment ads, right? So
Yeah.
I guess what she's implying here, not so subtly, is that Linda, of course, by Dan's estimation, more attractive. Certainly it does seem like she was
She's much younger.
and younger, right? So, she's sending these products suggesting that Betty is older, which is factually true, of course, and heavier, which I believe is factually true as well. So really just rubbing her nose in it.
Right. And that's another area where a lot of, especially women who were listening to the case at the time, really empathized with Betty, because it's like you don't do that kind of thing. And some of the things that back that up is that there are some people who look at Linda as kind of being a third party, kind of the innocent one in this, where Dan was really a big antagonist towards her, and Linda's kind of caught in the middle. And at worst, she was siding with Dan because she loved him, but she was reactive and things. But it is important to remember, like, there were a couple of times, several times, when Betty had come into the house and stolen something and taken it back to her house, and Linda found out that it was missing. She knew who took it. She went over to Betty's house, stormed right in, grabbed the thing and a couple of other things, would break things, and then leave. She wasn't an innocent bystander in this by any means, but I can understand where the back and forth of Dan and Betty would have gotten to her at a certain point.
Yeah.
And at that point, when they got married, she was 28 years old. Like, it was 7 years after she first met Dan, and so, like, she's 28. She's a little bit more mature, but she's had enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this becomes crucial. This point about the aggression was bidirectional, right? So we see some evidence suggesting that was possible, and of course, it could have been that Betty was exaggerating it. But either way, I think that Betty was successful in creating the perception that she was not completely offensive; she was defensive as well. She was being attacked. So she now has a gun. I believe this was a 5-shot revolver. It's a .38 special, right? So 5 cartridges in a cylinder that rotates as you pull the trigger. It's a double action, so you have to pull the trigger. It's a very distinct action for each shot, right? It's not like an automatic, like a machine gun or something. That becomes important as well. So we're talking about a gun that's actually relatively hard to aim, because the barrel's so short.
Yeah, very, very short barrel, fixed sights, so it's not easy to adjust them to get a good sight picture.
This weapon, the 5-shot .38 is really a backup gun for a law enforcement officer or a primary carry for, like, a citizen with a permit. It's a small gun loaded probably around a pound and a half. A lot of aluminum in the construction.
Yeah,
So,
and cheap. They're cheap.
yeah, well, I mean, they can actually, the smaller weapons, I think this was a Charter Arms, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe so. Especially at that time, they were cheap. Cheap in firearms today is relative.
But, well, they're all expensive.
But
these
yeah,
days,
they're
right?
all expensive now. But at the time, $100 for one.
Oh, yeah, it wouldn't have set her back much.
No,
to acquire
it didn't set her back much at all, but certain other weapons would have. Like, they would have been much more expensive.
Yeah, I think what surprises me about this weapon choice is, one, you're talking about the capacity, 5 rounds. I mean, I think she knew what she wanted to do with the weapon. Mm-hmm. And the fact that it's very light and small and very hard to grip, especially for an inexperienced shooter. Has a lot of kick because it's a very light weapon. Not really the ideal choice if you wanted to do what she ends up doing. It's just, I mean, a semi-automatic would have made a lot more sense, a 9mm or something like that.
Those are heavier. They are easier to control because they're heavier. But I think for someone inexperienced, feeling the weight of a weapon, you go, I don't want, this is too heavy. I can't hold this up. So, not realizing that, hey, that's going to have a lot of recoil.
Yeah.
When you pull the trigger, the fact that there isn't weight there is going to cause a lot more physics to occur. So to speak.
They're not very manageable weapons. They really are. I view them as kind of like, if you look at the Smith & Wesson J-frame, which would be similar. This is a weapon with a lot of kick that you use in an emergency. You get surprised somewhere, somebody pulls out a gun or a knife, they're going to kill you. You pull out this weapon, it doesn't have a safety, it has a heavy trigger pull instead. It's pretty safe to conceal. You pull it out, you fire it at point blank or at 4 feet or 5 feet. You don't put it up and get a sight picture.
So, something less than 20 feet where you can just kind of point and click. A lot of other weapons are definitely aimed weapons. You look for a sight picture, you bring it on target, because usually your target's further away and not quite as in danger situation.
Yeah, it makes me wonder if she maybe thought she'd be in a situation where she needed to conceal it, like that was important, because that's really what that gun's designed for.
You mean where somebody might attack her, perhaps?
Well, I'm just thinking she's going to be in a situation where, maybe it's warm out. She's not wearing a lot of clothes, so it's hard to conceal a larger weapon. Maybe something in her purse. Like she's thinking of different times when she can confront the people she wants to kill.
Right.
It is interesting when asked of why she purchased the gun, she actually said she intended to use it to commit suicide. And to be honest, I don't think that's necessarily untrue. I think that Betty, as demonstrated by some of her behaviors throughout this entire period, had either she'd always been or had become very impulse driven and driven by the emotional states that she was in at any given moment. So for her to say, I want a gun so I can kill myself, goes in and picks just a cheap something she can pick up and hold, because if her intention at that moment with the impulse is to use it on herself, why would she buy something that's more than that? But then once she had it in her hands, she's like, I got to figure this thing out. And because, once that impulsive, I want to commit suicide feeling fades, she now has a gun.
Right. It might have been, too, that the salesperson sold her that gun because he's seeing somebody that's probably wants to conceal it and probably doesn't want to feel that weight in her pocket all the time. So she maybe just went with the one that didn't draw a lot of attention. Like, I'll take the one that you think is appropriate for me.
I wouldn't put it past Betty, though, based on what we know about her. She would have walked in there, asked a whole bunch of questions, and really concerned the salesperson. Maybe she was really specific with what she wanted. Like, if I were to aim this at a person, or just suggest, I wouldn't put it past her, So I'm curious what the person who sold it to her was thinking about that.
Yeah, was it a typical purchase or was there like a red flag? So this takes us to November 5, 1989. Betty is 41, but in just 2 days, she would be 42. And
quick side note that's 4 years after the events of Back to the Future. November 5th, 1985 is the night where Marty goes back in time to November 5th, 1955. But, so.
I was just watching, we should do a show on that sometime. I was just, a few weeks ago, I watched the documentary on Back to the Future. Excellent. And I didn't realize how many fans, I've always liked that movie, but I didn't think there was that many fans for that movie. There are people who build, they take the DeLorean, which you can still buy, relatively cheap considering how rare it is. Around 20 or 30 you can get, $20,000, $30,000 you can get one. And they try to they look at the the VHS, whatever. Well, now the DVD, I'm sure is available, but they look at the footage and they
recreate everything, right down to the Mr. Fusion, like everything.
It's incredible.
There was one guy who recreated both one from the original, which doesn't have the Mr. Fusion, and then the one from the next two. He actually built a third one because he replicated the one from the end of the third movie, which has the train wheels.
Yeah.
So because they were put them on the train tracks, but yeah, and even the 1950s cobbled together circuit board to replicate the single chip that from Japan. Like, because by that point, the 1950s technology versus 1980s technology was a huge difference. But he replicated that as well. So he had 3 different DeLoreans that he'd replicate. It's a huge thing. Mm-hmm. I myself am a huge fan of the Back to the Future series. I watched all 3 of them back to back at least twice a year.
I think it really is. The documentary, they said it was the perfect movie. And I was like, oh boy, that's pushing it, because time travel seems forced. But they made a lot of points. I mean, it was a very well written screenplay.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's how you know you've made it. If you've recreated DeLorean 3 different times, that's how you know you've made it in life.
He'd also been divorced 3 different times.
Never mind, I take it back.
That's actually not true. I'm not sure about that one. I do know about the replication of the DeLoreans, but not about his marital status.
All right, I'll base it on the DeLoreans. Yeah. He's made it.
Another tangent. I recently made a video on John DeLorean after watching the documentary with Alec Baldwin, who kind of did play him in parts of it. Like, it was kind of a strange documentary because Alex like sneaking in and doing the part, and then you're going back to the factual stuff. But amazing guy. I don't know how popular that story will be, but his story is incredible. John DeLorean was incredible.
Yeah, he absolutely was. It's unfortunate that he ended up financing things using illicit means.
Right. Yeah, he was never convicted of a crime, which is pretty amazing considering what he did.
No, but it did shut down his business. Like he was starting to do really well with the business, and then it all got shut down.
He had a number of, I think he did probably a number of things that were illegal, but he never technically was convicted, although he did, he was not wealthy when he died. Things did not work out.
Yeah. But we're at November 5th, 1989, 4 years after the events of Back to the Future.
So at this point, it's important to note that Dan and Linda are married. They're living in a house.
And Dan's 44 years old. Betty is 42. It's
42.
It's 2 days. Well, it's 2 days before her 42nd birthday. So technically 41.
So she goes to the house at 5:30 a.m. and makes entry with a key. I believe her daughter, that she somehow manipulated from her daughter.
Yeah.
I had heard that she had taken the key from her daughter when her daughter was at a park.
Yeah.
I don't know if her daughter knew about it or not.
Her oldest daughter at that point is 19 years old. The second daughter is 18, and the other 2 kids are much younger than that.
Under 18.
Yeah. They're like, I don't remember exactly how old they were at that time, but they were definitely under 18.
So I had heard too that Dan would consistently tell the children to guard the house key with their life, right? Like, don't let it out of your sight. He obviously knew that Betty, was not well.
Well, she had repeatedly broken into the house in the past, so
right.
It makes sense.
So it's not clear to me how this happened, how she got a hold of the key, unless she just stole it. But I would think at that point that if Dan truly did make the point of, don't let this key out of your sight, I don't know why they would even be in the house at that point. If they assume that Betty's out there with a key.
Yeah, and how would the daughter not recognize the key's missing and then know exactly who?
Right.
I didn't know if it was. I think some reports say that it was like a manipulation thing. Other reports, she took it, but either way, she obtained it when she wasn't supposed to.
She obtained the key when she wasn't supposed to. I think Dan's concern at that point was not so much that she would come in and kill them and murder them, but that she would come in and vandalize more stuff. Sure. Like it's like keep that key. Don't let your mom have any access to it, because she could come in here and just demolish all of this. And
more spray painting,
more spray painting.
More pies on the wall.
Yeah. Oh yeah. She covered his room with pie. How many pies do you have to bring over to do that? To cover head, ceiling to floor, just everything covered in pie.
She is the perfect housewife. Though.
Yeah, but I can imagine that the combination of impulsivity and sheer anger that comes up, like just the idea hits and then doesn't give up for a while. So she sits there and bakes pies.
Another senseless pie attack.
Another senseless pie lost.
So she makes sense. Go ahead.
I was going to say the interesting thing, according to Betty, was that the day this happened, she'd received a letter, and she didn't really. She switched up the story about what was in the letter, and she's never been consistent with what it was. But it angered her so much, and it didn't just anger her. It like made her feel, according to her, hopeless. And so she went over to Dan and Linda's house with that key that she'd manipulated. And she went in. Her statement is that she went in intending to kill herself.
Right, to really make a statement.
With the gun, to make a statement, to make Dan watch.
Right. So,
because this letter supposedly was the last thing that had destroyed her utterly. And she was going to make him watch
she
killed herself.
So she gets in there. Again, we're talking 5:30. She enters their bedroom, where they're sleeping, and apparently has a change of plan.
Yeah.
She fires 2 shots, striking Linda in the head and chest. She was killed immediately.
Killed instantly.
She then fires 3 shots, presumably all 3 fired at Danny, striking him once in the chest. He was trying to get to the phone.
Yeah, he was rolling over out of bed trying to get to the phone, was struck in the back with one. The other 2 shots hit a nightstand and the wall, I believe.
Yeah.
So
she fired. So she emptied the weapon.
Yeah.
Only had 5 rounds. She emptied the weapon. And, of course, at this point, she's alive. Dan and Linda are dead. So double homicide. She never denied at any point that she...
No. In some of her statements about it, she said that she spoke to Dan before he died, because he didn't die immediately. Linda died immediately. The bullet to the head killed her. I don't think she even woke up from hearing the first shot. But Dan did, and he rolled over and got shot, and he didn't die immediately. So Linda says that she spoke to him before he died. And she didn't say what she said, but presumably it was something nasty.
And it probably wasn't like an apology.
Yeah, probably wasn't an apology. Probably was something nasty. But there's also indication that the police statement said that the phone and answering machine that had been on his headboard were moved as well.
Pulled from the wall, I think the cord was pulled.
Yeah, the cord was pulled from the wall, but the phone and answering machine, they were on the other side of the room.
So he was struggling.
Yeah.
He was struggling to communicate.
Which the prosecutors at that point said that she either did that before she shot, or she did it afterwards because she to stop Dan from being able to call anyone to help.
Yeah. Considering her poor planning skills, I'm going to guess that it was something that occurred afterward.
Yeah.
So, at this point, if Betty were to open the Betty Broderick School of Self-Defense, what would they teach there?
Yeah, there's so many lessons in this case, right? I mean,
definitely set up for the insanity plea. Like that's rule number 1. Set up for the insanity defense.
Yeah, this is such, looking at this from Dan and Linda's point of view, right, for a moment. This, looking at all the evidence available now, it seems obvious that Betty was going to do this, but of course, this is still a low probability event. You could go back in time 1,000 times, you'd only do this one time. This wasn't the expected behavior. But still, he didn't have like a front gate. He didn't have like a German Shepherd. He didn't move, as you noted. He didn't like switch up so they're in another room, like make the house a little confusing so that an intruder wouldn't know where you were. He had the money to do all these things. But he was just in his bed with his now wife. And not even a gun on his end table. Just reaching for a phone, right? Which is great. I mean, in 5 or 10 minutes they might get there for a call like that. He's going to be dead by that point. I mean,
well, the coroner actually said that he was alive for at least half an hour after he got shot.
How did it take so long for the police to get there?
Because it hit his lung, but he ended up choking on his blood in his throat. Like he was still able to breathe because it hit through one lung, but the other one was still functional. And it wasn't until the blood filled up in his throat and he could no longer get air that he ended up choking on that. But it was a half an hour. The coroner estimated half an hour. So, I mean, like, if he had been able to get to a phone and called, he might have lived.
There's a possibility he could have lived, yeah.
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 Which I'm pretty sure is why Betty yanked the phone.
Right.
And she didn't, at that point, she didn't want him to live.
No, I think her intent was certainly to kill them
And I'm not sure, because of a lot of the impulsivity that she demonstrated and a lot of the other stuff, I don't think she went over there intending to kill him.
She might have been leaving her options open.
I honestly do think that her story of going over there to kill herself in front of him was absolutely true to that point, because that was the kind of dramatic thing that she had been doing for a long time. Like, she making him watch as she killed herself would have been absolutely in character, considering all of the other stuff that she'd done. And then she saw the two of them laying there peacefully in their bed, and you know, the bed that she should still have been in, because that's her place. I mean, she's Catholic. The divorce thing shouldn't even have been a thing. Like,
well, look at the imagery.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, they were in bed. That conjures up image of sex and everything. That was probably just too much.
Yeah,
she was going to kill them no matter what.
That's rage at that point. That's just utter rage. Impulse snaps, and then she's just pulling the trigger, aiming at them.
I had heard that Linda said something like, call the police. So Betty made herself known when she walked into the room. I don't know what she said, if she made a noise, slammed the door, I don't know. But she could have just shot them while they were asleep, and Linda wouldn't have, But she did something, whether intentional or not, to make it known that she was there. I'm going to do this, and you're going to know about it. And perhaps to your point.
Yeah, well, I mean, is the revenge really sweet if you just shoot and kill somebody and they never know?
Right.
I mean, that's she wanted them to know, she wanted them to feel the pain and die, but also know that she was the one that killed them. She wasn't the type to like plant a bomb or something and kill them instantly with nobody knowing. This was a very personal crime. Again, it speaks to the weapon choice, no matter how that happened. Close range weapon, and she walks up and just shoots them in bed. Like, it's very personal and intimate.
It's with Betty. She never denied it. She's never denied it. But to the point of Linda saying, call the police, that's a statement by Betty. And she'd made several statements that conflicted with that. There were others that say they never woke up, or Linda didn't wake up. She never moved, because it was, they didn't know I was there. Rage just took over, and I started shooting. And because the first two shots went to Linda, of course, Dan was awake by that point. 2 gunshots go off in your room. You're going to wake up for that, you would think. And so he's rolling over at that point, trying to get away from her or get to the phone or something. And it's, the truth of what happened in that moment is something, the only thing we'll have is the evidence to show that Linda died right there in the bed, and that Dan died a half an hour later on the floor. He was out of the bed because he'd rolled off, right. But he was on the floor. So we're not going to know whether Linda actually said anything, whether she didn't say anything. We're just never going to know that.
In that half hour, she fails to call the police too. Like, there's no change of heart.
No.
So.
And Betty can present her own image at that point. Mm-hmm. She did say something. She didn't say something, depending on whatever she thinks suits her at that moment. Right.
I'm inclined to think that she would tell the truth, only because of what happens as we move forward. Sure. But it's hard to know. Once somebody commits murder, they have a massive incentive to not go to prison. So you never know what they're going to say.
But that incentive with Betty is one of the weirdest things. Like almost everybody else I've seen who's in cases that I've reviewed who have committed a murder, and even if they admit it within a short period of time, they don't try to they don't come forward with it. But that's what Betty did. Like, she left. It was 5:30 in the morning when all this happened. She leaves, goes home, sees her daughter and her daughter's boyfriend, tells them what happened, and they convince her to go to the police pretty easily. She's at the police that day.
I think she called her daughter was in Arizona. I think at the time.
But I know that it was another character that hasn't been introduced in this whole thing was Betty's boyfriend. She had a boyfriend at the time who apparently was quite handsome and well off himself. So she had another love interest, but she was still so hung up on Dan. And I don't think it was hung up in love with him. I think it was just she needed the fight. She needed that connection to him. She needed to be able to just go after him. But she had a boyfriend, and her boyfriend went over and was one of the two people who entered the house and called the police to have them come and find the bodies. Like,
So think about this behavior. She kills in the early morning. She could have left. There were no witnesses, right? She could have buried the gun, thrown it in a river, thrown it in the ocean. They're in Southern California. There's a lot of places that gun will never be seen again. But she immediately confesses, calls the police, right?
Yeah.
So she wants people to know that she did it. She didn't even make an effort. Like, you figure, okay, you're looking at life in prison. Make the effort. Give it a try. Sneak out of the house. Get rid of the gun. Don't admit to anything. Don't talk to the police. Get a lawyer.
go on a road trip. I wasn't there.
Do something to
I
give
was never
yourself
there.
a chance, right? To introduce reasonable doubt. Doesn't even bother.
Just says, yep, I did it.
Yeah, I think it was important that people, from her point of view, that people knew that she got revenge.
Yeah.
That they were dead because of her and because of what they did, more importantly.
But also, a lot of people point to that and say, well, she was the victim here, and she never denied the murders. She was always upfront about it, and that's what a lot of people use to say that she was the victim, and that Dan was the one who caused all the trouble here. So there's two sides to that for some people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this strategy, so just taking a look at the evidence we have so far as we come to the trial. Certainly people could empathize, but it seems like a open and shut first-degree murder case. It seems like a premeditated murder of two people done the homicide,
seems that
life
way.
in prison, maybe even the death penalty, although nowadays that would never happen in California, but back then it was a possibility. This is not long after the time of Richard Ramirez, and it was kind of a tough one crime period there in that area, although that was Los Angeles and this was San Diego, but still, serial killers are scary. At this point, we see someone who's going to get convicted. Like, it doesn't seem possible that this doesn't end up just, I get it, presumption of innocence, but it seems very clear that she'll be convicted. The trial is a formality. Yeah. And yet she turns it into a circus.
Yeah. And we said that, looks like she was planning for the insanity defense. That's not actually the defense she went with. She did not go with the insanity defense. No. She went with the battered wife's defense. She said that she was broken by Dan and Linda. She said that she was driven over the edge just by years of physical abuse, psychological abuse, emotional turmoil at the hands of her ex-husband and his wife. At the trial, she was portrayed by the prosecution as someone scheming, as someone who planned all of this out, and the prosecution pointed to those letters, the advertisements for the skin cream and the weight loss stuff, and said, we've looked at these letters and we've looked at the envelopes because they were right there. Like, Betty didn't throw them out; she kept them all, and none of them had a postmark from inside the local area. They were all from out of town. And so the prosecutor said she mailed them to herself. And the reason she kept them, like, if these things were so, damaging to her and so, emotionally impactful for her, why did she keep them? And the prosecutor says she kept them because she wanted proof. She was trying to set up her defense. This proves that she was scheming.
Yeah, which seems like a very difficult defense considering she just could have tried to kill them and not get caught, right? But yeah, it's kind of, she needs people to know she shot them. So how can she commit murder and get away with it, but have everybody know she did it?
Right.
This wasn't like she's going to use a crossbow and shoot them from, in the bushes outside or something. Like, she wants everyone to know she did it, but still not go to prison. Or I'm not even sure she cared that much about prison.
And the prosecutor even used mental health stuff. Like Betty didn't bring up anything other than like the abuse stuff, and her attorney really stuck on the abuse stuff. They were not trying to use an insanity defense, but the prosecutor used some of the work that had been done in analyzing Betty, interviews that she had done with psychiatrists, psychologists, who said that she demonstrated histrionic personality disorder and narcissistic personality disorder. And he said that too, and the prosecutor tried to use that to demonstrate that, she planned this all out. It's all for her. It's all for her benefit, because the histrionic is that out of control. I need to be the center of everything, super impulsiveness. But the narcissistic is I am the center of everything. I'm the most important person in the world, and everything revolves around me.
Let's take a look.
Combination of that extra drama.
Let's take a deeper look at those two disorders, right? So they're both cluster B personality disorders, right? So in the same cluster as antisocial and borderline. Now, I find it interesting. So it was Park Dietz who diagnosed her with NPD and HPD. Mm-hmm. And he's kind of an interesting, I believe he's a psychiatrist, in that he involves himself in high-profile cases. It's really kind of his career was spent in a number of high-profile cases. I would argue that Dietz is probably the most famous psychiatrist in true crime.
He is a psychiatrist, yeah.
Yeah, he's been involved with.
He has that medical degree.
Right. Yeah, Andrea Yates. He's been involved.
Joel Rifkin.
Joel Rifkin.
Dahmer. Bomber.
The Iceman, Richard Kuklinski. Yeah. So really, I mean, whatever you see, a high profile like serial killer or other type of killer, you know that Dietz is going to be in the area. And that might just be because he's so popular. He's an interesting guy with the Andrea Yates case. I don't know if you remember this case, but she murdered her children in a bathtub. And it turns out that it was some type of psychotic disorder that was at work. She really did appear to have psychosis. Well, she was convicted partially because of Dietz's testimony. He testified that essentially saying that there was a Law and Order episode that featured a mother drowning kids in a bathtub. There never was. Didn't exist. He had consulted the Law and Order, so he said he got confused, and he did go back and say, look, I made a mistake, and I think she's in a mental institution now. Like, I can't remember the disposition, but something changed based on that. So, maybe a few blemishes, but in general, just a high-profile witness for the prosecution. So looking at narcissistic, this is a disorder, you see things like envious and sense of entitlement, arrogance, condescending, a person who's extroverted, right? They're confident, extroverted, charisma, manipulative. She doesn't necessarily strike me like this. I think one could argue that Dan was more like that kind of slick, everyone likes him at first, but a little bit of him goes a long way type of thing.
Right.
Not that he had the disorder, but he just seemed more like extroverted and grandiose.
Like the histrionic, though, the excessive sensitivity to criticism or disapproval, the craving of attention, a tendency to believe relationships are much more intimate than they actually are, making rash decisions, blaming personal failures or disappointments on other people, deflecting away. This like that could be a very good description of Betty. And if you mix in some of the narcissistic traits with the histrionic stuff being much more prominent, I suppose it could make sense as a diagnosis for that. But it doesn't. It still doesn't explain all of the stuff.
No, right? I never really saw Betty as impressionistic. Now, but of course, she doesn't have to have every symptom. It is important to note that Dietz saw her, and obviously, we would defer to his diagnosis because he actually made it and was allowed to make it and had all the information. It's certainly possible that he saw something that we're not seeing in a few television interviews. I mean, that makes sense that he would see a lot more. It's just interesting because these disorders, they mean something very specific, and it's not always evident in her presentation that we can see, which is a very small amount of her total ability to present. But either way, I think I find it interesting, though, historically, that Dietz often comes up with personality disorders. Like, so if you just take it away from...
Everyone's got a personality disorder.
He really likes antisocial, it seems like, as a go-to. Now, to be fair, he's working in a lot of cases where that would be the presumed diagnosis. So, I mean... But
it is at this time beginning the trial, we're evaluating it, saying like there's no way she doesn't go to jail for the rest of her life. She's not said she didn't do it. She actively went to the police, said, yeah, I did it. Here's the weapon I used. She's described what happened. She's there, and yet the first trial ends in a hung jury.
Yeah, So the jurors. The hung jury wasn't about innocence or guilt in this case.
No, it was they were given the choice to go with second degree murder or manslaughter. And manslaughter,
the first degree murder wasn't even.
It wasn't even on the table. It was second degree murder or manslaughter, with manslaughter having a way lower prison sentence. And 2 of the jurors held out for manslaughter, citing a lack of intent.
Yeah, which is odd because she pointed the gun and pulled the trigger.
So what do you guys think, just going back to the diagnosis stuff, why do you think it was important that they would include that? Like, what do you think that would do for the sake of the jury? What do you think that would do for the sake of the judge, perhaps? Or, because whether she has these things or not may just describe her, but what do you think was the overall effect?
I personally think that the overall effect is playing into the stigma against mental health. There's still a stigma that exists even today. It's much less so because we're seeing a lot more in the way of advocacy for mental health stuff. But the big thing was if we use these big psychological terms, if we say she has histrionic personality disorder and narcissistic personality disorder, then all of a sudden she's crazy. And crazy people need to be locked up. Like, that's been kind of the thing since the medieval era, when people with were thought to have demons in them, and they were taken to churches and monasteries and put in cells.
Do you guys think that it would also have been for sympathy's sake? That she's got something wrong with her. I don't think I can really blame her for this.
Yeah. Possibly, but the fact that the prosecutor was the one who brought it up and the defense wasn't, I don't think that was intended to be used as a sympathetic thing. I think it ultimately did. I think that helped her. It's like, oh, look, she was driven insane by the stuff that happened. I don't think the jury, and a lot of lay people don't understand the nature of personality disorder starts much earlier in life. But I think that helps the defense in that point. And again, this is just speculation, but I think it really did. Like, they were like, oh, wow, all of this stuff drove her literally insane. And that's one of the reasons those 2 jurors were like, she didn't intend to do it. She intended to kill herself. They drove her nuts. They literally drove her crazy. She has these personality disorders because of them, which wouldn't be true if she actually does have personality disorders, would have formed.
Before she even met Dan.
Well before she met Dan.
Yeah.
Would have been beginning to form as a child.
I think what happens here, and again, if you look at the other cases that Dietz has been involved in, other prosecution mental health clinicians, he's not the only one, and they all kind of do the same thing. It's a familiar pattern, which is the prosecution runs out and gets people who will say, or they happen to say, this person has 1 or more personality disorders. The defense, not in this case, but often, gets somebody to say schizophrenia, or a major mood disorder with a psychotic component, like major depressive disorder, bipolar 1, or bipolar 2 for that matter. So this is the classic standoff that I've seen so many times play out in these cases that we review. It's psychosis versus a personality that's maladaptive.
Are they super crazy for life, or is this just a temporary thing?
I think it could be looked at as like, did you know what you were doing? Because if you're psychotic, you're hearing a voice telling you to murder, and you believe that the person's like an alien, or you believe that they're a CIA agent or whatever. So that wasn't an issue here. So it does seem like, I would agree with you, Mike. I think this was just to get the stigma of cluster B onto her, because there was really no reason. If the defense wasn't saying schizophrenia, there's no reason to say a personality disorder. Now, again, you could have thought there was.
Yeah, if the prosecution had left off that and just been like, she's stone cold, she's sane, like there's nothing wrong with her, and she made the decision, I think the first jury would have been like, can we upgrade from second to first? Like they would have really bought the she's a schemer thing. But in that first shot, I think they were just waffling back and forth. Like the one, on one hand, she's a schemer. On the other hand, she has these really impulsive making personality disorders. Like she can't make decisions, out ahead of time. It's all just snap judgment things. But, and I think that played into those jurors saying no. But shortly after that trial, the prosecution decided to try it again.
Right. Yeah, which was pretty clear. You were between manslaughter and murder too. Right. So there's no, you don't say, well, we gave it a shot. You got to take this back to another jury. And this time they did a little better. Yeah,
well, essentially, it was just a replay of exactly the same stuff, but they put a little bit different emphasis on different things. All the same points were made, but they put a little bit more emphasis on the planning aspect and a little less emphasis on the mental health stuff. And that jury convicted on second-degree murder.
She got the maximum sentence. It really tells you what the judge was thinking there.
Yeah.
Right. And 2 counts of second degree.
2 counts of second-degree murder, 15 years to life, with 2 years for illegal use of a firearm.
Yeah, which won't matter, but they were really trying to send a message that she's never supposed to get out of prison. Now, the time we're making this video, I believe she's in her 80s. The math there.
No, she'll 70s. Be in her 80s the next time she's up for parole.
Oh, that's right. That's what she's in her 70s.
Yeah.
But she won't be eligible for parole until she's 84.
Yeah.
Which is in 2032. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. She first came up for parole. She did come up for parole in January 2010, and the parole board said no.
In 2017, another rejection.
Because she has never shown remorse for this, not ever.
In a sense, you have to admire her commitment to her original intent. Not that it was good, but you just have to admire that she's following through. It was never about, I'm going to commit this murder and play innocent. It was about, I did it. I want everybody to know they hurt me. They got what's coming. And if you let me out of prison because you acknowledge my pain and my justification for committing murder.
Interestingly, one of the statements made by one of her children, is actually still in contact with her, was that she still thinks she'll get out. She thinks that she will be released from prison at her next parole hearing, and that her kids are going to buy her a condo in La Jolla.
Yeah, so you have to wonder.
Yeah, I don't think because she's not going to. At this point, she's been in there since the early 90s. Like, she's not going to show remorse or admit wrongdoing at this point. It just over the next 12 years, she's just not going to do it. Unless she pulls a Red from Shawshank Redemption and just like pulls on a display of like, oh, I'm really sorry. I don't think she'll do that because she doesn't. She's not. I don't think she is. I don't think she's sorry at all. In some of the interviews she's done, she came out very confident. That what she did was the right thing. And so I don't think she sees it as a wrongdoing, and she sees it as kind of an injustice that she's in jail. And so I don't think she'll say so. She won't get out of prison if she doesn't show any of that. And it's a difficult thing for her to live with, being in prison while being the martyr. Like, yes,
she calls herself a political prisoner.
Yeah. Right. Yes, Linda and Dan are dead, but Betty's the biggest victim of this because she was so clearly abused by the two of them. And to be clear, I'm not making any judgments on it. The back and forth that happened was tremendously terrible on both sides. Like, it was so contentious that it became a national story during that. Like, people were tuning in to hear what happened in Broderick versus Broderick this week, because it was just so dramatic. But the jury spoke. The jury said they believe that she committed second-degree murder, and she's in prison. And the only way she'll get out is if she demonstrates that she has regrets, that she admits wrongdoing. And I just don't think she's going to do it.
Her anti-hero status at this point requires her to stay committed to that she was the deliverer of justice. She's the Dark Knight, right? Batman, a noble yet troubled figure who's striking out because ultimately, his parents were murdered early in life, and right. she's got the same.
She may not be the hero we deserve,
Right, exactly.
but she's the hero we need.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the world would be a more dangerous place or a more inconsiderate place without her. I mean, I do find one thing interesting, going back to the trial that I want to touch on. I mentioned it with the firearm. She did try to make this claim that the Charter Arms 5-shot, 38 caliber revolver went off by itself the 5 times. It's just charged and happened to strike 2 victims and kill them, which, she doesn't mention that part, but yeah, just by itself. So it's a strange thing to say when you want credit, which is my whole premise, right? That she wants credit. But then she was kind of minimizing, like, well, maybe the gun wanted it too. I don't know. The gun was empathizing with her. I don't know what the story was there.
The gun was on her side. I knew it.
Even the gun can tell you.
Even the gun knew that Dan and Linda deserved this. Like, it's an inanimate object. It still went off trying to do this. I know that she has her diehard supporters. Like, they're there. Like, she got a raw deal, this, that, and the other. But I personally, I think that she did get a raw deal in many ways. I think that she was definitely outclassed in the divorce. I think that that Dan went out of his way to punish her for certain things. And I think that her own mental health issues played a huge role in how she interacted with him at that point. And, the only thing she ever wanted was just to be that stay-at-home mom. And she never really got to be that. Because just about the time that she was leaning into that, they had a kid who died within days of being born. And everything changed after that. For a very short period of time, everything changed and Dan was out. He was done. And I think it wouldn't surprise me if we look deeper into Dan's pattern of behavior at that time, if he didn't spend way more time at the office after that. That the grief of losing that kid drove him into overworking, and that their relationship kind of crumbled at that point, which would have opened the door for, hey, there's this 21-year-old woman who comes in, and it's an immediate attraction. And Betty never gets to be that stay-at-home mom that she wants to be, because she's still working. She's still doing the Avon stuff right up until the time when he left.
It's also, I think, worth noting that we don't know what was really going on in that relationship. And a lot of times affairs start because something's wrong in the primary relationship. So, not to give Dan the benefit of the doubt too much, but it might have been something that was really already broken. And his affair was just an expression of that.
There are some statements from Dan in interviews that were done during the time of the divorce where he says that that Betty was asking for a divorce from day one. Like, they got married, they left for the honeymoon, something happened, and she said, "I want a divorce." So like it started off on a rocky footing to begin with, but I think that things were going okay. Things were at least livable until that thing happened, and then the grief just kind of forced them apart. And while I think that on those points Betty got a raw deal, that's not an excuse for murder.
Yeah,
I honestly don't think there's any excuse for murder. Self-defense is one thing. If I'm in fear for my life, if my life is being threatened, then I will do everything I need to get out of that situation. But to stand there over 2 people laying in bed who are asleep, there is no way you can fear for your life.
The question comes to mind for me, what would have been a better way for Betty or someone in this situation to have dealt with Dan or somebody like Dan? And I'm sure there's many examples of this. High-power people, lots of money involved, and like you had said before, Dr. Grande, when they exchange, the older wife for the younger wife and so forth. Yeah. And obviously murder was not the best option. Right?
It wasn't the best coping mechanism.
Right.
That's not what I would suggest for anyone.
Right.
Yeah. This is a sad tale, because I don't think there is a good answer to your question. Right? I think the only answer would be you have to adapt to the pain.
Well, if she was getting, I think it was $14,000 or $16,000 a month.
It was a lot.
Dan. All right, that's a considerable amount of money.
Yeah.
That's more than I'm making.
Right. And so at that point,
considerably more than I'm making.
So at that point, she maybe could have just adjusted her behavior, got the kids 50-50 or something, and hate Dan all you want. Yeah. But her take on it was, well, if I can't have Dan, nobody can.
Right. It didn't seem to be about getting him back, right? It didn't seem to be about just eliminating Linda.
Right.
It was really more about revenge. Because as you mentioned, Mike, she had a boyfriend. Like she had moved on. She had the money coming in for quite some time.
It was about the fight. It was about the fight that was necessary. Like she had to have Dan in her life to fight with. That was a focus. That was a big thing. That was a way she got some stress out. To be honest, and I don't advocate this for literally anyone, but alcoholism would have been preferable at that point. Like
You don't want to escalate to murder.
Over drinking, and then going to rehab. Probably would have been a healthier option than the option she chose, which was just go head over heels into just rageaholic kind of actions that prompted backlash from Dan, which got more back from it was the nuclear winter at that point. They're just firing missiles back and forth at each other just right up until the end.
Yeah.
Where she finally fires the last nuke out of that 38.
And she wins. I guess.
She won, but it was that was that old mutually assured destruction.
Yeah, mad. Yeah.
Like she killed him, but she's in jail. Like
essentially for life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So
her life is as over as his is.
I'd say from a relationship point of view, kind of going to the mental health counseling, moving back to your question, Jeff, probably they had a lot of problems that occurred and they never solved them. They never worked through counseling and tried to address them before they became serious, and ended up with this huge amount of rage on the part of Betty and probably a decent amount on Dan and Linda. Really, the only thing I could think of is, during their kind of the formative time in the relationship, to really make sure that if a screw was becoming loose, a nut was going loose, right, tighten that fastener down. Don't look at like 100 of them loose and think, oh, why is this thing rattling? And try to get in front of the feelings of anger and rage and revenge and all, because that must have pre-existed any offenses. I mean, that tendency had to have been there. We're talking about the personality formation, the narcissism, and the histrionic, assuming that Parkes is correct. That had to form early on, and whatever mental disorders, if any, Dan had, any personality issues, they formed early on. So you got to get in front of these things. If you're living for years and years with a toxic relationship, expect a toxic end.
Yeah, and it was remember the late 1980s. Couples counseling was still only just becoming part of something you would see on TV or in movies. It wasn't something that people did, and as much as it had been taught to her as a child, that appearances are everything. The idea of her going to therapy with Dan at any point in their marriage probably wasn't anything that ever came up. And if somebody suggested it, she'd be like, oh, I couldn't do that. Like, and I don't have any evidence of that, but it just seems likely that at that time period that would have been, that was a very common thing that happened at that time period. It's like, oh, you need to go to couples counseling. No.
That seemed consistent.
It'd be more likely for that to happen now. And that I think is the essence of tightening down the nuts and bolts. Like if things are going, like if you're having those issues early in a marriage, or just before you get married, in today's day, 2021, just for dating purposes, in 2021, you go see a therapist. You go to a counselor. You go to one of the three of us, or somebody like us in wherever you are, and you sit and talk about your issues, and you try and figure things out, and you get some guidance on how to tighten those nuts and bolts.
Yeah. And you have to be open for any answer, because sometimes the truth is that the two people shouldn't be together.
That is correct. Yeah. It's not something that I would ever prescribe to a client, that maybe you two shouldn't be together, unless they're saying that to me. They're saying, hey, I'm not sure I should be in this relationship. I'm like, well, that's something we need to explore.
Although you may be thinking it.
I might be thinking it from the door. Like these two people do not belong together. But I would never tell them. I would say, hey, if you guys want to work on staying in this relationship, we'll work on it. That's what we're going to do, because that's what you're here for. We work on what you want to work on. But yeah, if you're going to tighten down those nuts and bolts, you have to do it. And there are some things you can do by yourself, but there's sometimes you need to get a mechanic for that car.
That's right. You got to bring in a professional. There's a
don't try that plumbing yourself like that.
There's a wealth of knowledge and experience and training that mental health professionals have that can bring quick insight to situations where the people in them might never get the insight.
Right.
That eureka moment. And that can happen more subtly. Usually it does, where, after 3 months of counseling or 6 months of counseling, people start to slowly realize, they slowly gain the insight, and they get that distance from the situation and think, wow, this is, I'm with a person that I could potentially be violent against someday. I need to get out before that happens. Talking about Betty Broderick, she could have recognized, like, wow, I have this rage in me and I could be homicidal. This isn't good. I don't want this to grow anymore. Move on. And you could argue, is there any safe place to her to move? I don't know, but some people should be with the romantic
New York
partner.
would have been the other side of the country, and that would have been her parent with her parents. So.
Well, I mean, in terms of, like, should she be in a relationship, right? Yeah. But yeah, distance would have been good.
Yeah, when it comes to Dan, moving back across the other side of the country would have been possibly could have been better. But again, with the appearances thing, going through a divorce, I don't think her mom would have accepted it. Like,
well, it broke her cultural.
It broke the cultural norm of what Betty grew up with, what her mother found important. Probably, I've had clients whose parents have told them, like, right up until the moment the judge banged the gavel and said it's over, that they said, you can work this out. You don't have to get this divorce. You can work this out, because it's so important to them not to break that cultural norm. But that's what happened with Betty. Like, it broke, and it was very shortly. It was less than a year. It was like 8 or 9 months after the divorce was finalized when all this happened. So I don't think there was time after the fact for her really to have gone back to that point. And it was too late at that point. Like, it just was, everything was brewing towards that catastrophic makeup.
So this is where we'll leave this case. Betty is in prison. I'd be very, very surprised if she ever got out, but it's technically possible in about 11 years. From the time
11
we're
years,
making
yeah.
this. So we'll see if you're watching this from the future. Check the news.
And if you can, send us a message back right now.
Right.
I mean, I'd love to know right this second.
Connecting to the Back to the Future theme.
Right.
Well,
If
yeah,
you have a
before
time
that.
machine, if you're in 2032, time machine should be everywhere
On your
at
phone.
that point.
It's just the
Right.
app.
You just
It's on
use
your
the time machine app. Send me a text message on.
Use the DeLorean app.
It's for the DeLorean. It's a little stainless steel car.
I don't have any text messages right now, so I don't either nobody's watching us then, or
We must not be popular in the
must not be
future.
popular at that
It's
point.
disappointing. On that disappointing note, that's like what Top Gear is. Top Gear.
On that terrible disappointment.
All right. So, yeah, Betty's in prison for a long time. She is the quintessential anti-hero to many people who feel that they've been traded in a husband and wife relationship, or wouldn't have to be husband and wife, but two people are married. So, interesting case. Please put in the comments any thoughts you have about the case, if you can empathize with her, or if you can't, or other thoughts, maybe things we've missed, or expanding on things we talked about. Thank you so much, Jeff and Mike.
Yeah, thank you.
Please be kind in the comments.
Thank you to the audience. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Murder Part, and we will talk to you soon.